Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Fierce Telecom video interview. As always, my name is Alejandro Pineda, a member of the Fierce team, and today it's my great pleasure to be joined by Phil Jones. He's the Global Vice President of Business Development for Copperleaf Technologies, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about telecom capital planning and decision making. Phil, it's great to meet you. Great to have you on for our Fierce Telecom audience. Before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and, of course, Copperleaf?
Okay, hey, nice to meet you, Alejandro, and I'm glad to be here today. So as you said, I'm the Global VP of Business Development at Copperleaf. My educational background is in electrical engineering, but I've actually spent most of my career in technology sales and business development, which I've been leading at Copperleaf for more than a decade now. Working with clients across many industries to help them improve how they make investment decisions. As for Copperleaf, we're a decision analytics software company based out of Vancouver, BC, Canada. We offer capital planning solutions for critical infrastructure industries like utilities, oil and gas, manufacturing, transportation, and similar capital intensive industries. Like the common thread across all of that is that all of our clients spend a lot of capital and they have a large physical asset base to manage so they can deliver their products and services. And that's actually that sort of problem of how to make capital planning decisions in that context is what I've been focusing on for 13 years. Good capital planning is hard to do, especially when using outdated tools like spreadsheets. Copperleaf is all about helping leaders make the best possible decisions about where and when and to invest their capital dollars to drive the most value for their money and resources. We've been doing this for more than 15 years, serving clients from around the world. Over the last year or so, we've been getting more interest from telecom companies, which I think is what kind of brought us here today.
Absolutely. And I imagine that there's a lot of interest, as you say, in that decision-making solutions for telco based on the greater complexity of networks and the services and the clients they're serving. So can you tell me a little bit more about what that interest is and what capital planning challenges are they actually sharing with you?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, we hear about a lot of challenges, but I'd really kind of boil it down to, probably three that really stand out. So first, compared to many other industries, just the volume and variety of capital investment decisions that telcos make is really incredibly high. Their networks are constantly physically expanding. Their equipment's aging. They're facing new threats like the increasing cybersecurity threats. They have amazing opportunities with 5G opening up what seemed like it'd be an endless possibility of service opportunities to provide. And all of this while the cost of capital is rising. So this high number of opportunities and needs, combined with constraints faced in telecom because they just can't afford to do everything, have made it really complex to do planning in in-house spreadsheets and using manual processes. So, these organizations, sure, they can come to a decision, right? But is it the one that delivers the most value to their business, right? Is one of the big questions. Many of the telco companies we speak to feel they have to oversimplify the decision-making criteria and even how they analyze the decisions because they're supporting the process in spreadsheets. They know this is a compromise and they're concerned it's not really resulting in the best decisions. This can kind of manifest in a few different ways. Low return on capital, plans that can't be really properly executed because nobody integrated that kind of execution capacity of the organization into the planning process, and even things like high value programs being deferred because of pet projects, mostly because of lack of understanding of what drives the most value in the business.
So I guess what you're saying is that decision making in the real world is complex, right? The
Yeah.
tools that these telcos are using, or rather the enterprises are using to make those decisions, need to be able to handle that complexity to
Yeah.
be effective. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and actually, the way you said that made me think of an analogy. So NASA went to space, using slide rules in the 1960s, right? Well, they don't use slide rules anymore, right? They've moved on to more sophisticated design and analysis tools, and the capabilities are radically different, right? I look at spreadsheets, as being kind of like the slide rule of planning processes, right? but it's ubiquitous. Almost every organization managing billions of dollars of capital, use spreadsheets to do it. So another challenge we hear because of all this is that capital planning takes too much time and effort, not only for the decision makers, but also for planning and the planning teams, but also for, the people creating investment requests, the project managers, the analysts in there, basically everybody. It hits the telecom industry particularly hard because they compared to a lot of other industries, the pace of change is fairly intense, right? So these telco companies need to be agile and respond to changes quickly. But most are relying, again, on these spreadsheets and manual processes, the kind of slide rule planning analogy, to support the planning. And it can take months to build a plan and weeks to months to rebalance it with something changes, right? So think about the amount of time that takes. This causes a lot of frustration. It's bad for morale and employee engagement, of course, but the real impact is opportunity cost. A few examples you come across is senior leaders having to put critical decisions on hold while they're waiting for the planning team to run, another scenario analysis on a new strategy, which can take months. Directors spending weeks everywhere debating project priorities instead of addressing important tactical or strategic questions. And investment owners and project teams really spending countless hours, updating spreadsheets and moving data around instead of focusing on value creation and value preservation. This is why capital planning processes are so ripe for digitalization and some automation support, right? And with the right support, plans like this can be built in weeks instead of months, and scenarios can be set up and analyzed in hours instead of weeks.
Phil, this is interesting to me because we've heard so much about digitalization, virtualization of just about every process in telco for a while now. I'm a bit surprised by what you're saying, that when it comes to capital planning, it's still done manually. Why has that fallen behind? Why has that not already been digitalized or automated?
Well, it's probably a couple things, really. I think some leaders just have come to accept that planning has to take a long time. They see it as just a byproduct of complex decision making in a large enterprise. And frankly, maybe the second thing is many have never managed a planning process anything but spreadsheets. They just don't know what's better, right? So if we've shown, Copperleaf has shown time and time again with our clients, planning doesn't have to be a slow, painful event in spreadsheets. Good planning can be done quickly and continuously, which is helpful in a telco environment.
Absolutely. Now, earlier on, Phil, you mentioned 3 key challenges. What's that third one?
It really comes down to kind of using another analogy again, comparing apples to oranges, right? Like in this case, comparing sort of like a growth-related investment to something like a risk-mitigating investment, right? So one is about value creation and one is about value preservation. So there's a class of capital portfolio owner in any organization that deals with risk mitigation, and we hear from them a lot. In fact, many times our clients start off a Copperleaf implementation with that team of people. But they're focused on projects that address things like cybersecurity or reliability risk, and those portfolios don't directly generate revenue, but they stand between a service provider and something like a security breach or a service outage or a regulatory infraction, right? All these are, so preventing those things is value preservation, right? These teams their projects many times are frequently first on the chopping block when budgets are cut, largely because they struggle to quantify and communicate the value of those risk mitigation activities in terms that allow decision makers to compare them to revenue generating activities, right? And then the result of underinvesting in these sort of risk mitigation portfolios can be really high profile, right? Like and very expensive in terms of hard dollars and customer retention and brand equity. And we've all seen high profile service outages and security breaches that are making news, across the global telecom space when they happen. And so what these teams need, right, to communicate the value of these types of investments is what we call a value framework, right? And it provides a way to confidently compare different types of investments. For example, a reliability investments against revenue generating investments. And it does it on a common economic scale. So a well-designed value framework is like a decision-making superpower. It changes how organizations think about decision-making, effectively making it possible to compare apples to oranges, to potatoes, to kitchen cabinets.
All right, I like the sound of that. So, Phil, listen, you walked us through some big, impactful challenges that we're facing when it comes to telecom financial planning, capital planning. Before we wrap up here, then, how does Copperleaf play a role in helping out when it comes to surmounting these?
Yeah, again, it kind of comes down to, I always tend to think in terms of threes, right? So it comes down to three things. I think the first thing is defining value. We've touched on that a little bit. I'll talk about this some more. Portfolio optimization and scenario analysis is a huge capability, and then efficient planning process management. So just Copperleaf, we provide an end-to-end investment planning solution for the enterprise that's built around that value framework concept I've been talking about. It allows companies to define value across their entire organization in more ways than just financial terms, and it helps align their investment decisions to their strategic priorities. And we do this by quantifying benefits on a common scale, so the value of every investment is consistently assessed in a rigorous, consistent way, so you can make decisions based on that instead of intuition or gut feeling or squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of paradigms. Even the most dissimilar investments can be compared, so you can make these difficult decisions with confidence. So, for example, if you're making a trade-off decision between something like a new fiber network going into a small community, or upgrading existing cybersecurity infrastructure to reduce the risk of a breach, we make it possible to directly and quantitatively compare these very different projects and understand their contribution to the strategic objectives of the company. That common definition of value that enables our clients to optimize their plans, right? And that's a mathematical process, but our AI-enabled decision analytics software looks at all the potential investments, and it looks at the number of possibilities of how you would combine those and time those to generate the most value for the business. And it basically lays that out on the table in front of decision makers and lets them look at that and say, is that the right way to generate the most value for the company? And it does that, and fits the plan in with all the financial and resource constraints, as well as addressing the targets of the organization. So it's a really powerful process. It's a step-changing capability in it. Again, that's why I refer to spreadsheets as a slide rule. And then all of this is provided as part of an end-to-end planning solution that makes good decision-making both faster and easier by, digitalizing these capital planning processes, saves everybody time and makes the organization as a whole more decision agile.
Absolutely. Well, listen, it sounds like Copperleaf is well positioned to help telco companies address and overcome many of these capital planning challenges. I feel like we've just scratched the surface here during this interview, and I wish we could talk more on the subject, but we have run out of time. Phil, on behalf of myself and our viewers, I just want to thank you, and I really do appreciate the time that you've taken to share what you've learned with the industry. It sounds like there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alejandro, it was a real pleasure just having the chat with you today, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak with you. I'll just add that for any viewers who found this intriguing, the topic, please go to copperleaf.com, and contact us and learn more about how we can help you on a value-based decision-making journey.
Lovely. Well, and there you have it, viewers. Make sure you check out everything over there at Copperleaf.com. Until then, thank you for joining us and for watching this another edition of the Fierce Telecom video interviews. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.